All right, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for taking the time to come and join us this evening. My name is Mandy Power, and I'm the very proud president of the Dawson County Chamber of Commerce, Office of Tourism and Economic Development. On behalf of my advocacy task force, we are excited to facilitate and host this town hall with our state legislators and our local officials. I would also like to take a moment to thank the 400 North Association of Realtors for co-hosting and providing the wonderful surprise refreshments that you just enjoyed as you arrived. I believe the President, Patrick Bell, is here. Thank you, Patrick. And Frankie Elliott, did she make it yet? She's on her way. She'll be here just a second. She ran into some traffic. But they were instrumental in helping us plan tonight's event. And of course, I would also like to thank my advocacy and chamber team who are here as well to help support and facilitate, thank you, this town hall. So we at the Chamber of Commerce care deeply about our community and our citizens of Dawson County, and we are citizens just like you are. We have a vested interest in the topics being discussed here tonight. We have handouts that hopefully you all have gotten that have a lot of valuable information. We also have pens in case you want to take some notes and jot some things down, let us know. Excuse me. We expect to hear lots of information tonight and hopefully debunk some myths maybe that have been going around our community. One side of your flyer has the history of the millage rate in Dawson County, and the others at the bottom has how we compare it to the surrounding counties. And then on the reverse side are the current county exemptions that are in place, and a few friendly reminders that I'd like to cover with you now. First, be respectful to all. Our local officials and state legislators have willingly given up their time to spend with us tonight to learn and give and get objectionable feedback, and you have all chosen to spend your time here tonight, and we are incredibly thankful for that. The second friendly reminder is to stay on topic. Today we are talking about property taxes, property assessments, and tax exemptions. Have a solution mindset. I always say, this is my rule for my staff when they come to me, don't bring me a problem that you don't have a solution. So remember that when you're asking questions today. Let's come together and figure this out. Be sure you share your ideas, be practical and realistic, and I love this one, be community focused, not individually motivated. We are all a community together, so just remember that. So we're going to kick off this town hall and welcome our three elected officials. Senator Steve Gooch from District 51, our majority leader of the Senate, Representative Will Wade, District 9 House of Representatives, and our Dawson County Commissioner Chairman, Mr. Billy Thurmond. So let's kick off. Let's start at the state level and have Senator Steve Gooch and Representative Will Wade discuss the state level on these topics.
All right.
Don't forget to unmute yourself.
Okay, let's make sure. Can you guys hear me okay? All right, thank you very much. First, thank you for being here. I know many of you in the room, and there's many of you that I don't know, so I'm excited to get to meet new folks. I'm honored to serve as your state legislator in District 9. I'm in my second term. I'm a sophomore legislator, which means I still don't know much. I do know also, folks, if you're a little bit confused, no, I'm not Kevin Tanner, but this is still his old seat that I'm trying to one day hopefully pass it on to somebody, and then it'll be Will's old seat. But I'm glad that you're here, and I'm looking forward to having a good conversation about what's going on at the state level with property taxes, assessments, tax assessor's office and the law that they have to follow, and then talk about this from a statewide perspective, what's been going on all across Georgia because of the 40-year high inflation that all Americans are facing. And what we've been blessed to have in Georgia, especially North Georgia, is home appreciation because of people wanting to move to what we have here. And that's a double-edged sword. It's a blessing, and it can be also a costly curse as far as taxes. I also want to thank personally Chairman Billy Thurmond for being here as our county commissioner. I'm glad that he's here. I hear you as well, because this is not a one-size-fits-all. We have to work together as county commissioners and as state legislators for the betterment of policy, both locally and at the state level. And he's always been willing to listen and hear our thoughts. We try to do the same for him, and especially listen to those that put us in office to be your voice, whether it's in meetings up in the Dawson County Courthouse or down in Atlanta at the Capitol. So thank you for being here, and then I'll introduce Senator Gooch. He's my senator. I happen to be his rep, and we like to we like to poke each other a little bit, but we're very blessed to work with each other. And I'd say we agree about 90% of the time. So go ahead, Senator Gooch.
Well, thank you, Will. We'll have to see what the other 10% are after a while. It's been a pleasure being in local government for over 23 years now. I started out as a sole county commissioner in Lumpkin County, where I was first introduced to this whole concept of what's fair market value. Our county was literally in trouble with our state Department of Revenue. We were being assessed penalties because the sales tax or the sales ratios at the time were somewhere around 30%. They're supposed to be between 36 and 44, I believe. And so our county had not set up the values for many, many years, and so we were being penalized, and so I had to learn a lot. So this topic has been at the top of my priority list for many, many years, to try to figure out how in the world do we make any sense of it. So being a former county commissioner and now in the state senate, I have a good perspective on both sides of the equation, and it's somewhat like a seesaw. When one goes up, the other one comes down, and you can look at charts, you can look at numbers. To me, it doesn't mean anything until you look at your tax bill. When you look at your tax bill, that says it all. It's either up or down, right? And so you can look at what Dawson County's done over the years has been very impressive, but y'all need to thank the folks like me in Lumpkin County, because we shop down here at your outlet malls and your stores. But that's been very, very important for Dawson County. But we're about to catch up to you, because we're opening up a brand new hospital at the end of 400, and Publix is underway. They're breaking ground as we speak, and good things are about to happen on the upper end of Georgia 400. But and all joking aside, we have a beautiful place in North Georgia we all call home. Some of you haven't been here probably more than 5 or 10 years. I'm a 6th generation Lumpkin County guy. I'm going to live there until I die, and don't plan to leave. The rest of you guys got here as fast as you could, I understand. Now the key is not to mess it up, and so that's our job up here, is to make sure we preserve it for the next generation. And I look forward to working with all of you on this situation. We've been through these discussions before. I went through this similar topic over in White County about 6 years ago as their state senator. We came to a consensus on some tax relief for seniors over there. And I can tell you that no matter what you do, there's always going to be somebody that says it's not enough or it's too much. Depends on which side of the equation you're on. And so this is a good discussion. I hope we have some constructive input from you all, the general public, because we work for you. We are your voice at the state capitol. Will and I punch a green button or a red button. Those are our only two choices. There's not a maybe or a present button on our machines. So we have to make a decision on your behalf. So having input like this is very valuable to us, because we can help to form an opinion that's based on a community input, not just what we think. So thank you for having me, and I've always look forward to working with our commissioners. I've known Billy for many, many years, and of course his predecessor, what's your name again? Mike Berg. We go way back in the day, so I love the local government stuff. Patrick, I've known him for a long, long time too, and he was a commissioner in Forsyth County. Somehow he survived. They didn't throw him out. It's hard to survive that job for many, many years, and Forsyth County has seen growth. If you want to see out of control growth, there's some of it down there. We don't want that to happen in Dawson and Lumpkin County, so it's good to have these kinds of conversations. Thank you.
Well, on behalf of the Board of Commissioners, I'm glad to be with you here tonight as well. I appreciate you coming out to discuss the property tax values and how they're arrived at. And obviously, our tax assessor's office, they do a good job of following the rules that they have to go by. And so hopefully through some great dialogue, we can figure out a way to change some of those rules that would be better, especially for our senior population that are living on a fixed income. And so working together with the state and the county working together, and as they said, any rule changes that they make are going to affect all 159 counties, because they don't just vote on stuff, for Dawson County. Now, they may introduce some legislation that can help our seniors that are specific to us. And as you look at the exemptions that we currently have, and you look at the age of those, then obviously it is time to make some changes to those, because some of them were adopted and voted on by people back in 2008, and some of them, like the standard homestead exemptions, 1930-something model. So, you know, there are room for some of those, and working together, hopefully we can come up with a solution. As they said, it's not going to fix everything. It's not going to make everybody happy. We could fix something that makes every senior happy, but then that burden falls to someone else. They're not going to be happy. So, you know, we've got to work to try to come up with something other that's fair and equitable for all citizens of this county. And just one of the things I wanted to touch on as you look at this little paper here, when you look down at the bottom, and it talks about, you look at the blue, which is the county millage rate, which is all I have anything to do with. I have nothing to do with the school millage rate. You elect school board for that. And you look at Forsyth County being at 4.791. That doesn't tell you the whole picture for Forsyth County, because they have a fire district tax, they have a road tax, and you look at Dawson County's 5.634. That's encompassing everything. That's your fire, your EMS, roads, everything. So when you look at taxes and you look at millage rates, you have to understand that a lot of counties have different pies, and if you're just looking at their county standard tax, which is what they call their general fund tax, it may be lower than ours, but it doesn't encompass everything. But all of our stuff are in one.
Great point.
Yes, thank you, Billy. Thank you for pointing that out. We kept this apples to apples, so you have that, but no, there could be some more, and I'm happy to adjust that and send it to everyone that is here that I have information for, and put it out there as well, so that you can see that as well. So to kick it off for the Senator and Representative Wool, y'all kind of speak to what you have control over at the state level. So when we get questions from the audience, they'll know who they need to steer questions for, because Billy, I think you did a good job of kind of telling you what the county does, but if you'll kind of tell everybody about the state.
Sure. I want to speak to you a couple things. One is, as a state representative, I also happen to be, in this term, I'm a governor's floor leader, which means I help the governor's legislative policy team enact his priority legislation. One of those priority legislations in this past session was the increase to this year's homestead exemptions being offset to the 40-year high inflation. We went from $2,000 exemption to $20,000, which most of you probably saw in your final tax bill. That credit somewhere between $300 and $500, just depending on your specific property, if it's a homestead property. That was legislation that I was a co-sponsor of on behalf of the governor. The Senate was 100% behind it as well, the House, so it was something that we and the Republican caucus did on behalf of all taxpayers for their homesteaded property. I'm going to tell you of some kind of fairly real-time data from the House study committees. We have an ad hoc committee for the Ways and Means. That's the committee that handles tax policy in the state. So a couple of things that the state is looking at to prioritize the issues related to laws that the tax assessors have to comply with. That's all 159 counties. And then also, what can government do to try to make sure that we're providing transparent information to all property taxpayers in the process while local elected officials are making decisions related to whether or not they're going to have an opportunity to roll back millage, or based on whatever the needs are. I can remember the Great Recession, in which we had to hold millage the same even though property values were dropping precipitously, and you still saw a net decrease in your taxes because they didn't increase millage rate to offset that. So those are decisions, those levers that Senator Gooch mentioned are a component of that. So right now there's two kind of leading efforts. One of those is, it's a good time to have a conversation about changing the statewide $2,000 homestead exemption to a new increase, okay? I don't know what that number is going to be. There's 180 House members. There are 56 senators. You have to have 91 votes in the House, and for the mathematician in the Senate, you got to have 29, and then you get one governor to sign it. So we have to find consensus around what number is that going to work for. We're blessed in Dawson County to where That number, if we went to $20,000, I think our county, our school, we would be able to absorb that based on the economic activity and the other revenue streams. But there's probably a third of our state that would literally wipe out a huge revenue source for those local counties that are smaller and shrinking. So we have to be careful about how much of a change we do. I've heard some numbers about going to $10,000 instead of $2,000. That's a number that kind of in my mathematician banker head makes sense. It's a very large increase over what was done back in 1937. Again, it's one of those things I could probably see people argue for 25,000 or even 40,000 if you did an inflation adjustment. But you also have to realize the negative impact to those other counties, and that can become another state burden that we have to balance. The other piece that I think is really important is for the taxpayers to have transparent understanding as to what their taxes will look like under certain millage rate changes. So right now, your bill comes to you assuming that there's no change to the millage rate. It only accounts for the estimation by one entity that the county doesn't control what they do. They just have to live with that tax assessment to fall within that 36 to 44% sales model, right? What can we do to make it better? So why can't we allow for the tax notice that says a notice, it is not a bill. That's the other thing. We've got to make sure that we have it emboldened in print for folks to realize it's an estimate. Let's estimate what your tax bill would be with a 50% rollback. What would your tax bill be with a 100% rollback? Just so that you as a taxpayer will transparently know if my assessment, I'll say it this way, I did not appeal my taxes this year, even though I would probably sell to any of you that want to buy my house for what the tax assessment came back at. I, as an elected official, didn't feel like I didn't want to put undue pressure based on my position. I made a decision just to roll with it and accept it. But if you're a person that feels that your assessment is legitimate, you should then be able to see, okay, if Dawson County or Lumpkin County or White County or whatever county decides to do a full rollback, this is what your tax bill will look like. If they do a 50% rollback, if they don't make a change at all, this is what it will be. That way taxpayers will kind of obviously see this isn't a bill, this is a range, it is an estimate. That is probably the most prevailing recommendation that has come to that study committee across Georgia, because I think it makes sense to most taxpayers that I can see this as a estimation based on when the county makes their final decision or the school system makes a final decision on their millage rate. So that's the two big things coming from the House Study Committee. In January, when we start having presentations, and I talked to Sean Blackman, and he's looking forward to the Senate's ideas on conversations around doing 2 or 3 or 4 year rolling averages for the sales comparison. You know, it takes the boom and bust out of the real estate market. Right now in Georgia, tax assessors can do a 3-year average for agriculture property. One of the reasons is it doesn't change hands that often, right? Why do we, so my question, I'm a questioner, so why don't we do that for all properties? Because most houses don't sell every single year. Even in a booming economy, people are going to stay there a few years. Why do we want to do it just on the high, or even in a great recession, just do it on the low? Let's do a rolling 3-year average. So that's a conversation that the House is looking at as well. I don't know that we're going to have any changes to the 36 to 44%. That's a very lawyerly, detailed
constitutional limit.
So, and getting a constitutional majority in both houses is going to be more difficult. So we're probably going to focus in on being transparent as well as looking at an increase to the statewide offset exemption and considering a 3-year rolling average to take out some of the boom and bust cycle for that side of it. So I want to start the conversation there with the state perspective, and then let the senator chime in on anything that the Senate's thinking about as it relates to the current law that tax assessors have to follow.
Thank you. That's good information. So the word ad valorem tax is what? Latin for in accordance and value. So everything you talk about tonight is about taxes being levied by either a city, county, or a school board in accordance of the value of that property. So a lot of us buy homes and we live on them for the rest of our lives. Some of you get a 30-year mortgage, some a 20-year mortgage, some of you may pay cash for it. The ones who buy a mortgage probably don't ever see your tax bill because it goes into your escrow accounts. And so about once a year you get a notice from your bank, your mortgage holder, that you're either short or you're over a little bit on your escrows. I haven't gotten one that says I'm over because my insurance keeps going up and my taxes keep going up. You've got some good counties in Georgia that are doing great things, and I applaud the chairman and the school for what they've done based on these graphs. I would point out the county in my district that is really doing well is Fannin County. I have a piece of property in Fannin County I've owned for 10 or 12 years now. The property tax has gone down every year that I've owned that piece of property. It's raw land. In Lumpkin County, however, I wish my commission chairman was here. I'd pick on him because I went and looked at this today. When I
This
first,
is not the type of winning he wants to do.
I know, when I first bought my house in 2008, I paid $4,595 in property tax. Last year, I paid $7,165. So if you look at a 10-year look back from 2013 to 2022, my property taxes in Lumpkin County on my home has increased 51% in a 10-year period. I haven't done anything to that house in that 10 years other than maintenance, not nearly enough either. My wife will tell you that. So two things are happening there. We've seen a high growth of expansion of growth in people buying homes, values are going up, but also the millage rates have not been rolled back like they should be to keep that from being a tax increase. Every county and every city and every school has the authority to raise or lower the millage rate to meet their budgeted needs. So they have to create a budget and then they create the millage rate based on the consolidated values of the county. So that's called the digest, and that gets submitted to the Department of Revenue and they approve the digest based on the assessments that are being properly applied to each house and each residence, each commercial, each agricultural, whatever. So our counties in Georgia, some are doing good, some aren't doing so well in my opinion. So I say all this to say this, we're looking at several options. You've heard Will's comments already. We're looking at homestead exemptions that would be frozen at current levels. So you could take whatever your home is assessed at today and it would be frozen at that level unless you change basically the footprint of that home or do major modifications to it. That value would never change until you sold your house. So Patrick, you're still in the real estate business. If you sold Mike Berg's home today for $2 million, is that too low?
He just said sold.
If you sold that house on the lake, it's beautiful, it's got great vistas and all that, for $2 million, that value would be locked in at $2 million until whoever bought it from the Bergs decided to sell it to the Wade family for $4 million. When the Wade family pays $4 million, then it would be stepped up to the $4 million value. So those values would be frozen during that time between the buyers and the sellers. So that means that the county and the school or the city, if it's in the city limits, would have to truly manage their budgets based on the millage rates. If they wanted to raise taxes, they can. They would have to put notices in the paper, 3 consecutive meetings would have to be held. You can raise taxes, but the transparency requirements that the state law requires just gives the public notice that, hey, we're about to raise taxes on you. If you don't like it, come down to City Hall or come over to the school and talk to us, and you have 3 opportunities to do that. The intent of that was to make sure everyone had an opportunity to come either during the day or at least one time at night. And so that's what the state's involvement is to create a transparency, but also uniformity. If you look at the Constitution, there's a uniformity clause. We want everybody's homes to be valued uniformly based on the condition, the age, the cost to construct or replace. And so there's a lot of laws on the books to protect us from being basically discriminated against on values. And so the floating homestead exemption, in my opinion, is a good idea. The problem, the downside, if you want to talk about the pros and the cons, is that when you restrict the values on something, you're shifting the burden to people who are basically Johnny-come-latelys. So let's say the Berg sell to the Wades, it goes from $2 million to $4 million. Well, the property bill is going to double, right? If everything else stays the same. If the county and the city and the school keep the millage the same that year, the person that bought that house, the value doubled, their property tax would essentially double. Same house, the year before, it might have been $10,000. This year it'd be $20,000. So that's the downside. So the longer you're in that house, the better off you are. But we believe that's a benefit to the senior citizens that live here who no longer have children in schools. They're on fixed incomes. They sure as heck aren't going to pay those high property tax bills off of Social Security. Anybody in here think you can, try it and we'll see. You know, it's not going to work. So if you don't have a real good, strong pension plan, you're not going to survive off of Social Security paying high property taxes. And so those are some of the things we're looking at. You could also eliminate some of these laws altogether, but you still have to fund local governments. No matter what we say here tonight, when we live here, you have to understand, we have to run the fire departments, we have to run the public libraries, we have to run the road departments, we have to run the schools. God knows we need better schools all over our country. We have great schools here in Dawson County, but we have to fund them. 50 to 60% of the state budget goes to education, and probably 67% of your local taxes goes to education. I'm not picking on the school boards here tonight, but a fact is a fact. We have to keep our public schools healthy, and we have to make sure we can afford good quality teachers. That takes a lot of money. Fire departments aren't cheap. Road departments aren't cheap. These are facts of life that we all are elected to manage and handle. So there's no easy answer. Again, it's a seesaw. One goes up and the other one comes down. So we'll continue to work on that. I think you'll see maybe a couple other ideas based on income. I don't really like the income approach because I think it discriminates on people who have worked hard and put away and they have a pension. And so those are things that I believe we should try not to bring into the equation. I'd rather keep it fair and equitable to everybody regardless of their social and their economic ability to pay.
This is Will Wade, just my heart. Okay, this is who I am. One thing that I don't like about property taxes in general, for someone's home, for their castle, whether you have, and I'll say this, my mom's house is a 912 square foot home that does not have heat and air. She doesn't want heat and air. She loves the home the way that her home is. She's never complained when she stays with us about having heat and air, but that's another story. But my mom's home is her castle. But she never really fully owns it because she's going to be required to pay taxes as long as she owns it. I'm hopeful that at some point in time we can have a conversation about having an option for when a person has lived in a property as their primary residence, their primary dwelling for a certain number of years, that they're no longer required to pay any taxes.
Amen.
There are options to look at doing a host. I'm serious. There's an option. There are 2 counties in the state, and I'm researching this because I know if you have one side, there's going to be another side to it. Okay? So having a host is a way that homesteaded properties can be eliminated, and my understanding is that in 2 counties that has drastically reduced the taxes for people that are over 70 years old in those 2 counties on their primary residence, and I think it's capped at $500,000 value or $400,000 value. It's just an idea. We're not going to accomplish that in 1 year. This is an aspirational discussion, and I want you to know my heart. I'd like to see at some point you pay property taxes on your home, 30 years, 40 years, you shouldn't have to pay any taxes. No offense to the county or to the government. We have enough of a vibrant economy, enough changing of hands of commercial property that generates income, possibly have a sales tax to offset that. That's what I would like to see. But I also want to acknowledge this. How many of you folks have children or grandchildren that have not bought a home yet? Raise your hand. Do you want your children and grandchildren to buy a home and have the American dream of home ownership? Absolutely. So I want you to hear me, and I mean this from my heart. For every one of you, how many of you want to have a complete and total senior exemption from your home? Raise your hand. I know it's the same.
Absolutely.
So you want your children and grandchildren to pay for you to not have to have property taxes. That's just the reality of what we're doing, okay?
I'm good with that.
Mike's joking, and I like Mike, he's a kid. We're friends, and I can kid with him. You know, I know Mike would say, no, I just want Will's kids to pay for my taxes, right? But I want you to see that at some point, it makes home ownership for this generation, with 40-year high inflation, the highest interest rates in 40 years, it makes it that much of an additional burden and barrier to home ownership. In a time in which we have heard as state legislators that workforce housing and just housing in general for the generations that I know want to have ownership in something, it's far more difficult in 2023 than it was when I bought my first house in 2001. So I want us to acknowledge that piece. How can we balance that effort? So I want to share some ideas that I have for the Dawson County senior citizen, okay? I have a PowerPoint here. Some of y'all may not have it. I'm going to share this. She's got it. We're going to email it to all the folks that are here so that you can look at the details. What I want us to have the conversation in Dawson County is about simplifying it and making it more equitable, okay? Here's where my mind goes first. First, I want to acknowledge, compared to all the counties around us, we start giving tax breaks at the age of 62. Most of the counties around us start giving property tax breaks at the age of 65, okay? Now, I also want to notice that it has a $25,000 income limit. Just inflation adjusted from when this was initially put in, that should be $46,000 to $47,000 in 2023. I feel like we need to have the discussion about that initial tranche of upping that income level at a minimum, okay? That's just one avenue. I personally would like to see, if you're 70 years old, no more school tax. I'm a former school board member. But I also have a mama that is 77 who refuses to fill out the paperwork to not pay school tax. She has a fixed income. And I don't mind telling y'all, I've paid her property taxes for the last 3 years because my father passed away in March of 2021. Can my mother pay her own taxes? Yes. But I'm not going to let her pay it right now because I think she shouldn't be paying it. But she just has a philosophical decision. She doesn't want to exempt herself from property taxes. I don't want to even let her have to fill out the form. I just think, Mom, you're 70. You've been paying taxes since you were 23 years old. You've done your part. It's time for you not paying anymore. So that's where my initial goal is to eliminate property taxes for seniors over 70 years old. Then the question is, what do we do about that tranche between 62 and then 65? Now, how many of you look at Forsyth County and say, hey, Forsyth County doesn't charge any property taxes if you're 65 and older? You like that? Why didn't you move to Forsyth County? I'm just asking.
I left it.
And you left there because there are a lot more people in Forsyth County. There are also a lot more commercial businesses. Former county commissioner, right? The percentage of tax revenue that Forsyth County generates from non-homesteaded properties is a much larger percentage of the total tax revenue to both the county and the school system. They are in a financial position to where that impact is absorbable by both of those local governments. Do I think aspirationally I would like us to get there as a county one day? The answer to that is yes. I do want us to get there. So there's conversations about what if we went to a 65 and older, no property taxes for schools on anything below $500,000 and less. Meaning you only pay property taxes on a home that has a value of over $500,000. That's a tax adjusted or inflation adjusted number to what the original amount of homestead exemption was for the $300,000 or the 40% reduction at 123. That number is now $500,000 if you look at it in terms of 2023 dollars. That's where I'm coming up with that number. Not just picking how many people have a house worth $500,000. The realtors in the room. How many houses can you find just to sell for $500,000 right now? Right? Dawson County's average home value is about $470,000, $460,000. So to me, you take away the income piece and you just say, look, if you have a home that you're not going to pay any school taxes if you're over 65, unless it's valued above $500,000. That way it's uniform across the county, and we're starting with a major improvement to the senior tax exemption. That's just initial ideas from all the different incoming feedback I've gotten since that first tax assessment notice went out and people started raising their hand. Because a lot of people who have signed up for existing tax exemptions in Dawson County did not pay any school tax until this year. Because it's the first time that their home value went over that amount that was fully exempted. So now they were, as the old saying, they were made to care. They now had a tax bill that they weren't accustomed to having to pay. That's initial thoughts. I'm open to other ideas. But I also want to acknowledge, when we make this change, the school board is going to have more difficult decisions to make until the rest of the tax digest catches up, or they're in a position to have to make a tougher decision, and we're going to shift that tax that you don't have to pay anymore to younger people. Now, I'm going to say this and compare it this way. I'm blessed to be able to maximize my contribution to Social Security from my paycheck. I pay the max. I'm not planning on being a person in America that has Social Security to retire on. 2033, we are already set in federal code for a 25% reduction if we don't get the fiscal cliff in Washington fixed. Do you think I love paying Social Security taxes out of my paycheck knowing that I probably will not get to benefit from that? My generation is gripping with that. My kids' generation, I'm already trying to tell them they're not going to have Social Security. Now my 10-year-old's like, Dad, I don't think I need to know about that yet. My wife's like, hush, can you wait till she's in high school? But you understand the dilemma, right? Where there's a give and a take. What can we do to try to balance what's going to be in the best interest for as many citizens in Dawson County as possible? So that's where I'm starting. I'm going to listen. We're going to have hearings. Senator Gooch and I, as local legislation, we have to agree. Dawson County has another legislator that represents a very small part of Dawson County. That's Johnny Chastain. He'll have to also agree with it. That will impact citizens that live in that part of the county. They're going to have ideas and feedback. So I don't want to commit and promise you, hey, we're going to get rid of all taxes for everybody tomorrow. That'd be great, but you still have a school to run. You still have a fire department to run. You still got to have police paid for. We want to figure out a way to have a good balance to it. So that's kind of where my start is. I'm going to glean on input from this gentleman as a former county commissioner. He's been studying this issue for, 12 years now in the Senate? I want to understand when we make this decision, we're going to put it to the voters and let the voters decide. And I'm very willing to carry that legislation, and that's my intent, is to do it, and do it in 2024 so that it can be on the ballot next November. That is my goal. So that you've heard what I want to say to all of you folks, whether you currently pay taxes or you don't pay taxes. That's where my heart is right now. Thank you.
I think that's a great point. I think something that we have to understand as citizens is there's only so many ways you can slice this pie, right? So when Representative Wade alluded to having that right balance, know that it takes the commercial property when we're developing 400, and that will offset some of those property taxes. So we'll work hard to kind of try to keep those low in the economic development in the chamber, and bringing in some of those higher paying jobs that also bring in some of those higher tax revenue that don't take as many services, as the county commission did a study for that. Billy, do you want to add anything to the county perspective of that before we start taking questions?
Well, I would say this in reference to how we approach what our millage rate is going to be, that we end up with on the county side of it. And as the chairman, I have the obligation through the county's enabling legislation to create a budget and to present that to the other board members. And I can tell you that this is a fact, and you can ask any of the other board members the same thing. I actually look at every single line item of every single budget. It takes me weeks to go through all of that, and I compare that to what they've spent in the past. I'm looking for one-time purchase items that maybe they got $50,000 in their budget last year for this one-time purchase. I'm taking that out. They may have left that in there, but I'm taking that out. So we're always looking for ways, and we're also continuously look for alternative funding sources other than property taxes, because nobody wants to pay property taxes. I don't want to pay property taxes. No one in this room wants to pay property taxes. But as Senator Gooch said a while ago, roads are expensive. We led a contract the other day for 3 roads to do FDR, or full depth reclamation, where they go all the way down and start from scratch. $3.9 million, $750,000 a mile. It's not cheap. Now, I'm going to give you, as a voter, an opportunity next year to help us with that. Because one of the biggest complaints that we get throughout the county is obviously traffic and intersection situations like 53 and Lumpkin Campground. We're going to try T-Splosh one more time. And that's a penny of sales tax that in this county draws in somewhere in the $10, $11 million a year range. And so in Splosh we've been able to do that. Local option sales tax we've been able to do that. ELOST is doing that for the school. That is an alternative funding source that is paid by everybody that comes here and buys anything. So, and we've run some numbers on that. A lot of people argue with us on this, but that's somewhere in the 80 to 85 percentile range of money coming to us from people that don't live in Dawson County. So, those are the alternative funding sources that we as the board try to provide you with the opportunity to help us with. And so we're going to give you that opportunity to help us with that one more time in May of next year during the local election and the state election that go on at that particular time. But the school board as a whole, the county board as a whole, looks at being as prudent as they possibly can with your taxpayer money. And we will continue to do that. And I'll make that promise to you. I've done that for the 7 years that I've been your chairman and put together a budget. And we'll continue to do that. And as has been mentioned many times about fire and EMS and sheriff's office, those don't get any cheaper. They don't get any cheaper year to year. It has become, I will tell you this, we are battling today in our public safety entities major shortages of people to try to have just the personnel to man the engines and the ambulances and stuff that we have. The other day we were at a 27% vacancy rate. We just implemented a new plan in this budget that is going to help pay. If we can get someone to come here from Hall County and they have this level of training, we're going to go ahead and start them at that level of training. So that's something I have tried to get done for a very long time. And we're going to put that in this year's budget so that we can try to fill those gaps. But it's not just counties that we battle with anymore for paramedics and stuff like that. We battle now with hospitals. The hospital can pay a paramedic $30 an hour versus $50 an hour for a nurse. That paramedic has a level of training to be able to do even some things more than a registered RN can do. So they can take those people and put them in what I call a controlled environment. When you go to the emergency room and you work, you're working in a controlled environment. It's not hot, it's not cold. It might get bloody, but it's not hot and it's not cold. But that's not what you have out there on the street where you're up and down the bank, it's raining, it's snow, it's whatever. So we battle that. And then we battle everybody south of us for people. We've done salary study after salary study after salary study. And every time we do one, guess what happens? They do. And they up the ante. And so it is a very competitive thing for public safety people. A lot of people got out of public safety during COVID. A lot of people got out of public safety when they were being attacked and backlashed by all these groups out here that are anti-police and anti-everything else. People said, I've had enough of that. I'm not going to be in this anymore. So they're not turning out the numbers. I talked to Lanier Swafford the other day, who's our state EMS guy for this region. We're not turning out the people we used to turn out. And everybody that's being turned out today already belongs to somebody because they paid for them to go. And we've done some of that, trying to get people. So it is a challenge to meet that. And when you listen to my budget, if you listen Thursday night to my budget presentation, you will hear a lot about that and how we're trying to attract new people. We've totally looked at all of our benefit packages and stuff too, trying to come up with a way for retaining employees, because all you that are in business understand the cost of having to retrain and do the things you have to do if you can't retain an employee. So it's a challenge, and it's one that we are facing head on and trying to do at the most economical way possible for you as a taxpayer.
Yeah. And I'll just add this. The biggest challenge to county commissions and school boards everywhere in the state of Georgia, not just attracting and keeping people, it's actually covering the massive increase that we've seen over the last decade in healthcare insurance costs for county employees, for sheriff department employees, for school system employees, teachers, bus drivers, all good people, friends and neighbors, right? That number has literally gone up 400 to 500% in the last decade. And to give you this perspective from a school board member's decision making, Dawson County citizens fund about 60% of the total budget, and 40% of them, or 37.5% of it, comes from the state, and then you get 1 or 2% from the federal government for some Title IX money for food and for special needs. But the Dawson County taxpayers are funding the majority of the school system here in this community. It's because we are considered a wealthier county than others across the state. To give you a comparison, White County and Lumpkin County, local funding is only about 43 to 44 to 45%. They have less local revenues, ironically, because the senior tax exemptions and that, they have a larger percentage. They're a little bit larger population, and they have a larger percentage of folks that are taking advantage of that 70 and above. They don't pay any taxes. So just, it is a juggle, it's a balancing act, but I do think that we need to come up with a solution. And I'd like for Senator Gooch to give some insight on what his thoughts of a good, landing or a good target goal for a senior exemption update for 2023. You weren't in office when it was passed. You were county commissioner in Amos.
Oh, for Lumpkin?
Yeah, for Lumpkin and Dawson. So I'd love your input on what I've shared and before we have the Q&A.
It basically is a tax shift. There's no question about it. The school board did not cut spending, nor did the county, nor did the city. They shifted the burden to the people who do not qualify, raised the millage rates. Now we've gotten, with the high inflation, high values of homes, the initial exemption that Representative Amerson put in Lumpkin County was $300,000. A lot of the people that were exempt for the last 15 years are now paying taxes because their values have exceeded the $300,000. And so they're starting to say, we need to raise that number. And so we'll have to have that discussion. But let's hear from the audience. I'd like to hear what concerns.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
I wanted to, just a couple of things, because this conversation came up before I came in here, but Chairman Thurmond, something that he does, if there's another side to this, right? The county commission sets the millage based upon the budget, and he has been very transparent with our budget. He televises it. You can come in, for the public. So I encourage you to see the other side of that and see how diligently they go through the budget and how transparent they are, because it's important that you know also what we have to spend this money on, because we all want the fire department to show up when we call 911, right? So we need to make sure that happens. All right. Give my exercise. Eric, I saw your hand first. You'll stand up.
Thanks, Mandy. I brought up what I think a solution like 3 years ago. We bought a property for $125,000. It was like 3 years ago, 4 years ago. I fought it. It went up to nearly $400,000. So I went and fought that then, and I told them then, this is about to blow up. I told them that there. I think they recorded that whole thing. I gave them a solution I thought then. And basically what I said was that if you based it off of the original purchase price, the blow up would never happen. We spend all this money, we get people to go do these appraisals year after year after year, and it takes tons of man hours, which we've got to be paying for that. If you stop that, if you didn't do appraisals, I told him, I said, I'm a man that bought a $125,000 property. a man that buys a $400,000 property can pay taxes on a $400,000 property, but a man that buys a property for $125,000 can pay taxes on $125,000. Now, I do a lot of work with people that are moving in now, and they said, this is great. You're giving houses away, and you have no taxes. So not only did they sell in California and sell in New Jersey, get megabucks, and they're paying mega taxes, they come here with mega money, and then they don't see that increase on the taxes. If we didn't do all the appraisals and didn't spend all that money, a man that bought a house for $125,000 and he gets millage rate against $125,000, and then a man that comes from California and buys a mega mansion for nothing to him, he's sitting on a pile of money. They feel like we've been given here and we've been given there. You know, I went and fought it. You know, I spoke to those 3 people you're supposed to speak to. I think that thing's recorded. They just said that's state level. We can't do anything about it. I said it's a great idea, pass it on. That's what I'm doing.
So you're talking about the floating homestead that I mentioned earlier tonight, but you're wanting to get rid of the assessment process altogether.
Altogether.
Which is that would be a violation of the Constitution as it is today. We would have to change the Constitution. You would basically strip out the uniformity clause in there. That creates some challenges legally, but the floating homestead exemption is a workaround to get to where you're wanting to go.
What is the, explain that to me. What exactly, how is it stated?
Well, I don't have the Constitution in front of me, but it's basically that everyone has to be treated the same. If you both bought these 2 phones and they were identical, you shouldn't be able to say this one's worth $200, this one's only worth $100 when they're identical.
I think I've covered that.
So,
you know, because that person...
No, the Constitution says that they have to be valued, and I think it's every 3 years. And Chairman, you correct me if I'm wrong, every 3 years.
Yeah,
some counties do it every year. They do a portion of the county. Maybe they do ag farms this year, also year 2, and then in year 3 they go to R1s and the residentials. And then here's the other part of it. I'll give you a little bit of a background. Department of Revenue sends up their auditors every year. They go through the books of the taxes in the courthouse to see who bought and sold land, and they compare the sales of that property to what the tax assessor's office had it appraised for. And they want to make sure, they do random audits, they want to make sure that everybody's houses and their commercial and their residential and their vacant land is being assessed fairly and uniformly in accordance with the Constitution. If you don't have that uniformity, then they penalize the counties based on the number of parcels in each county. So that can be hundreds of thousands of dollars in penalties. That is to be able to, that's basically a stick to make sure counties are being assessed properly and uniformly. Now, tax assessors are appointed by the Board of Commissioners. They do not get a big check. They get a per diem, the tax assessor's board. Now, there's an equalization board that's appointed by the grand jury. That's like an appeals board. If you don't like the values that they put on your house, you can appeal that decision, and then you can ultimately take it to Superior Court for final adjudication. But the uniformity clause is something we would have to change to completely get rid of that requirement.
Yeah, that's where I'm at, is the uniformity, because at the end of the day, it would help everybody. And the reason I say that is, when you say uniformity, if I buy the house at $125,000, the next person buys it at $400,000, they get to hold that as long as they, you know, until death. You know, if it goes up to $25 million by the time they die,
Right.
And I understand that you can't do that now.
But the floating homestead,
that's the reason I push this on.
The floating homestead is a quick answer to your problem.
It is. It's
without
very
changing
simple.
the Constitution. Constitutional requirements require 2/3 of the House and the Senate, and then it has to go to the voters for a 50% plus 1 majority in order to make an adjustment.
The floating homestead is really close to my comment.
That's where we're headed with our discussion in the Senate.
Yeah. And Forsyth County, their delegation introduced local legislation, and it will be on the ballot November of next year for citizens of Forsyth County to make that determination. That is something that I'm considering in our discussion for Dawson County, Lumpkin County, and White County. Problem with local legislation is how many slices are you going to do? Are you going to do focus on cleaning up and making the senior exemption more concise, then looking at the floating homestead? The only major concern that I have with the floating homestead, look, I'm a career community banker who is lending in real estate. Almost all residential and farmland and ag. That's what I've done for 26 years. I remember the Great Recession, and I remember when I was a school board chairman, and that gentleman was the chairman of the county commission, and we've got the notice from our tax assessors that the tax digest in this county has gone down 37.5% because of the number of bank foreclosures and the foreclosures that came out of the Great Recession. It started in 08, and it hit our budget in 2010. And we're looking at how are we going to absorb a 37% when people were losing their jobs, your incomes were being impacted. So the negative is you end up resetting at that lower price when there was incentives from the federal government and the federal banking policy to cause there to be an incentive to have lower prices. So you just got to be careful about what are those inflection points when you have a boom economy and things get out of hand like they've gone here. What do you do when it's a bust?
The millage rate will catch it.
Right.
If you have the floating, what you call it?
Homestead exemption, floating
Okay.
homestead exemption.
Floating homestead exemption, if you have that, the millage rate is going to adjust to catch it. Every single year it gets reset. So you can go ahead and do both options at the same time because the millage rate is going to change to accept it.
They would have to make a decision as a county commission and a school board to publicly raise the millage rate to offset that in those deep.
It happens every year though. I mean, I'm a math guy. That works.
It's been lowered.
No, I'm not saying it wasn't. No, it was lowered, but the prices went up. You know, if you raise the price 90% and you lower the millage rate 20%, it's the seesaw.
Yeah, absolutely.
Good
All
question.
right, we're going to try to get to as many people as we can. We only have 30 minutes before they shut up all the lights on us.
I'll talk fast.
Okay, good. Stand up.
Yeah. Oh, I have to stand up?
Yes.
Oh, God.
Stretch.
Oh,
They heard the exact same argument from me also.
Okay.
In a previous life, I used to have to go to a different state all the time, and it's like, you don't want to go to that state of Connecticut. But they said, you're spending so much money with assessments, trying to figure out digest, millage rate, it was out of control. I appreciate everything you guys are doing, but the system is old, and it's inefficient. So what this particular state did, they said, we're going to fix all the property values at what it sold for or what it was when you got your certificate of occupancy, period. The county's going to come in and say, hey, Board of Education, we need this much money, we set this millage rate, and that's what they do. You didn't have to worry about subjective assessments, taxes on unrealized gains. My property has tripled in the last 10 years because I was dumb enough to buy here versus someplace else. But anyway, it just greatly simplifies everything. If the Constitution has to be changed, I mean, that's what needs to be done. But in the case where you said somebody's selling for double, let's say that everybody's property has been fixed at what they sold it at. The county comes in and says, or whoever needs money says, we need this, they get it. If a house suddenly sells and a lot more income comes in, the taxes don't go up. Everybody else's taxes would actually have to go down because they can only collect so much revenue. If you have a big surge in income because of increased property values, then that means everybody else's will actually go down. It's an incentive to get higher property values. So anyway, I could talk for a long time. Hey, thank you guys for being here.
I want to understand, in this state, they only exclude homesteaded properties from the assessment and they have to assess all other property types, or are all properties only based on what they last sold for?
I honestly don't know. This was in the 80s, and it was the left coast nut. I used to do research for Lockheed, so I was out on the West Coast all the time. It's called Proposition 13 in California.
Okay, Councilman. I thought that's where you were going.
I know. But when they got ready to do it, they said they were going to have to get rid of all the dog catchers, they were going to have to cut everything, and it was going to be this big calamity. They passed it. Now, they could inflate it, what, 2 to 3%, whatever the consumer price index that went up that year, but they actually ended up with more revenue because they spent less money doing appeal, less money trying to do assessments. I think the law requires Dawson County to have an accurate diagram, correct?
Every county.
It's not accurate right now. I've got a large amount of money. So, and as well as I remember, a few years ago, Dawson County spent close to $750,000 on their digest. Before it was finished, it was not accurate anymore.
It'll change every minute.
Yes.
What's their sales ratio now? Do you know?
We were just under the minimum.
So it's 35, 30, so you're due for another assessment then. The next year. The Department of Revenue will penalize the counties if it falls below 36.
Well, actually, if you look at the sales ratio, 81 counties out of the 159 fell below or over
Because
under the ratio.
We're in this hyperinflationary period right now too.
Last year, we actually filed an appeal last year because they actually told us that we didn't value your property high enough. So we filed an appeal and was able to give them 6 or 7 properties that they wanted to look at, and we were able to get back in the range. And this year we were really close to the range. We didn't file an appeal, but we were really close to the range, that sales ratio range. It did cost us some money. It did cost us some of the income that we would get from the utilities.
Right.
But we're, and as he said, if you're out of compliance for like 3 years in a row, then the state comes in and tells you what you're going to do. Instead of you telling you what you're going to do, they tell you what you're going to do then. Gilmer County is a great example of that. A few years back, I think Gilmer County wound up having to hire, I don't know how many tax assessor people they had in their office at that time, but when the state got through with them, they had 9. So there's always 2 sides to every pancake, as Sharon Fawcett used to say, and she was the commissioner. So we have to look at all of that, and our tax assessor people all have to take training. They all have to follow the same rules that's set by the Department of Revenue. And as he said, the Department of Revenue comes out every year and looks at the digest before it's ever sent out to see where we fall. And this is one of those unusual times where valuations have shot so high that, as you can see, more than half of the counties in Georgia are now out of compliance.
And I want to speak to that. I talked to the chairman of Ways and Means today to get an update on the study committees. That's one of the biggest things that they're looking at. And is there something that we can, in today's hyper-partisan, we have to have both Republicans and Democrats agree. Supermajority of the 121 votes in the House and 38 in the Senate. That means you're going to have folks from either side or the other side of the aisle agree with Republican leadership on what we do. That's where they were talking about a 3-year average to smooth things out, just so the valuation pieces can come up. There are going to be other suggestions. They're going to be talking with some economists from the University of Georgia as well as Georgia Tech to try to figure out is there something we can do to change that so that we don't allow it. I kind of think, why do we just have a cap on whatever inflation is at that time? That's the maximum amount that any property can be reevaluated at that period of time, so that you kind of get the floating homestead, but you also have an embedded, hey, it makes sense. My home should not be increased more than just general inflation. So those are other ideas in place to that. Next question.
Okay, well, I got some possible solutions for you too. Okay, I lived in Florida for 31 years. They had the same problem many more years before you guys did here. Property values going up constantly. What they did is they froze the property or the assessments of the value of that house and made it illegal to go above more than 3. If you own that house, you can't have your assessment raised more than 3% a year. And then the next person who bought it would have to, of course, pay the higher assessment. That's another possibility with your floating rate. Maybe you do a 2 or 3% or 5% maximum increase a year in assessed values.
And just so on that line, at Forsyth, the legislation that was passed that the voters are going to vote on, the floating homestead will have a cap of 4%. So that's what Forsyth County is floating. So it still means you can go up some.
Right, but you're not going to get a 33% increase like what happened with my house this last year. But yet other houses on my block only went up 10% or 20%. Yeah, now you say they're supposed to be assessed fairly. That's not assessing fairly, in my opinion.
Agreed.
We've got one house, there's one house in our block that's assessed at $385,000. It's bigger than my house, but my house is assessed at $620,000. Is that fair?
I'm sure you presented that information to the Board of Equalization in your appeal.
I am going to do that. I have made an appeal, filed an appeal. Of course, county tax assessor didn't approve it, but I'll have to go before the board and get my 2 cents in there.
Yes, sir.
So I think you need to really look at, are the tax assessors really being fair to everybody? Are they treating everybody the same?
You know,
I don't think that, in my neighborhood, I see ranges of 20 to 30% difference in property values.
there's something that all of you can do when you go home tonight. Pull up qpublic.net. Anyone ever been on that site?
Every day.
It has
Every day.
every parcel of land. Yeah, some of you realtors live and breathe on that thing. It has every parcel of land in every county in Georgia on
What
it.
was it again?
qpublic.net. It shows who owns it, the size of the land, the assessed value, everything. You can also go to Dawson County's tax commissioner website.
And I see that a lot.
And
That's
you
why I
can
got a
see
lot of
what your
information.
taxes are. So there's a lot of stuff, and if you don't think your house would sell for what it's assessed for, you should appeal immediately. And you have a good argument. If you really don't think it'll work.
There was a house across the street from us. It just sold last year for $560,000. It's a house that has always been valued higher than mine.
Right.
But because theirs sold recently for $560,000, their assessed value now is $560,000. But mine is $620,000.
Thank you for sharing your thoughts.
There's definitely flaws in the system, no question.
I want to sit down.
Oh, me too.
Thanks for all of you coming out tonight. Appreciate that. And I want to say that our small group, tax group that we've been looking at, we've been able to meet with the assessors. Been able to meet with some of the county commissioners as well. It's been a pleasure to have them be open and be able to talk to us. So we really appreciate that. When I came in office a long time ago, one of the main goals that I had was to follow the land use plan, to build on 400 so that the residents off of 400 would not have huge increases in taxes. And I think the Board of Commissioners is still following that, and it makes some sense to do that. One of the issues that we saw when we started looking at multiple assessments on commercial and land was that there was some incongruity there. And Billy, I think that and I know the tax folks are here tonight, it needs to be looked at so that there's a good balance to that. You got 20.1, 20.2%, almost a fifth of the population in Dawson that's 65 and over. You got another 5% that's 60 to 65. And there are folks out there that are on fixed income, that are either going to lose their home or they're going to have to move. And that is kind of unfair. The thing that I think we'd ask is that you take a look prospectively at the 65 and over. Get something on the ballot for the Dawson citizens to vote on next November that gives them an opportunity to speak their mind and say what they see. I think you'll come up with some good ideas, but in the end, we've got to make a balance here. If you don't have a balance, you're going to have folks moving. You'll have other things that occur like businesses closing. I mean, it all is a big balance. So I hope that you take that into consideration, and I hope that in November of next year, we're able to vote on something.
Thank you. I want to get a show of hands, just to gauge the room real quick. How many folks have been in a home paying homestead tax, property tax on your home in Dawson County for more than 20 years? Keep your hands up more than 30 years. So I'm a transparent person. So one of the things that I want you to see that I got to hear from communities like my friends in Lumpkin, when Mr. Amos Amerson passed that and you know, why there are differences. I was still in college when these things happened, so I have no idea, you know, why the difference between Dawson's and Lumpkins and White's. Everybody has a little bit of nuance. But I will say this, I have a heart for people who have been in this community and have spent the last 30 and 40 years paying property taxes to both the county and school, and also are now over 65 years old. They have committed and supported all of the efforts of our local government, our local schools for generations, right? And I'm very sensitive to that community. I also acknowledge people that are over 65 and 70 have fixed incomes and they pay taxes probably somewhere. So I acknowledge that. But I also think that we need to consider if, for example, I've had several, a group of folks that are advocates for seniors have emailed me at the house, State House email, and said, hey, what if you did a tax exemption for all citizens over 65, no more school tax, but require that they have at least have paid taxes in Dawson County on their home for just 5 years. So that what we don't do is and I mean this to all the friends who moved from California, I want you to know, welcome to God's country, thank you for being here. But we don't want to necessarily incentivize all of these folks that are selling huge McMansions in California and then coming here and not contributing at all to what everybody else here is trying to preserve and protect. So to me, that's another balancing thing that I want input from you. If you like that idea, if you don't like that idea. I mean, look, I'm a married man for 20 years. My wife will let me know when I don't have a good idea. I got a 10-year-old daughter that's now the stereo to that same input. I don't mind constructive criticism. So if it's not a good idea, I want to hear that too. But those are the other balancing things that I've had feedback from other Dawson County citizens, that we don't want to necessarily attract a whole bunch of folks from other states to come into this community and never pay any taxes at all.
Okay, I'm Dan Dorfeld. I've been leading the task force along with Mike, which stands for Tax Accountability Steering Committee. So we've come a long way since June. I really appreciate the work that you've done, Billy, with the county and the school board, and met with the tax assessor and the Board of Equalization and others and all those types of things to get to this point. One of the concerns I have is that an old mentor of mine said, when all is said and done, much is said and little is done. And we've been talking about a lot of things. I want to make sure we don't get lost in the big picture. And the big picture is what's happening at the state level, right? And all the things with floating homestead and changing the Constitution and ideas of Proposition 13 type things that have happened before. That's all good. Other counties, in the metropolitan area, of course, are ahead of us on the senior-based exemptions. So we'd like to have a fact-based discussion and provide input into that. And we understand some of the complexities and comparisons. The task group has actually created a spreadsheet of all the different surrounding counties and what the information is, and what their exact exemptions are, and we don't know exactly what they're planning. I think you might know more than we do about that, but some of the information we heard tonight is actually incorrect from an accuracy perspective. So, for example, Lumpkin County, we know exactly what their tax commission, what their exemptions are. So I want to make sure we know exactly what we're talking about, and that we want to be fair to the school systems and the residents. For example, in Forsyth County, one of the problems they had that they adjusted for was when they put in the 65 exemption on schools, a lot of people moved into their senior citizens' houses, went to the school system, and didn't pay school taxes. So they had to adjust that in 2017 to make sure that if someone was living in that house and going to the school system, that didn't apply to them. So those kinds of things, we want to make sure that we want to be fair in that regard. So the task group is asking for input into what you're doing to make sure that something fair gets on the ballot for November of 2024.
And I'm going to make sure, Mandy's going to get this out, so make sure you get her your email. This is a PowerPoint that 2 interns from University of North Georgia that are working in my district, they earned a scholarship. They're both political science majors. they have done the same thing, and they've looked at all the nuance of each county that touches us. So what I was trying to explain, the difference between Lumpkin and Dawson, here's the bottom. I'm a numbers guy. The bottom line is, based on the number of people who have any of those exemptions at any level, the revenue that the county schools, just to make it easier, Lumpkin County's revenue, total revenue is $56.9 million, okay? White County, 62.2, Dawson County, 69.4. So you can see that Lumpkin County, out of just my district, has the biggest impact to their revenue because the number of senior folks that are on a senior exemption are greater, or other total exemptions. So it's not just the senior exemption. It could be timberland, it could be, you know, the fact that there's a lot of college property, there's other nuanced pieces, but that's a component. So I want to consider that as well. And look, I think that there is going to be something coming from the state as it relates to, the biggest thing is what do we do with homestead exemption. It's been around for 37. I like the idea of having a floating homestead cap, maybe tied to inflation from a statewide. Every homeowner in the state can have that. And then I think is taking that approach. In Dawson County, I want to have a senior exemption for school taxes at some age, whether that ends up being 65 or 70. I personally, where I'd like to introduce it, I'm not even talking to the senator about it, so I'm not trying to put him on the bus today.
Don't commit, right?
I can't commit him to it, but I would like to have the 65 and older, but you have to have lived here for at least 5 years before you can qualify for the exemption. To me, that's kind of, as a Rotarian, it's fair to all concerned. It is also very clear and concise. There's none of this ambiguity about income levels, et cetera, et cetera. Then the argument from a budget standpoint to work with the school system, because they have a job to do as well, is do we need to have a cap on the amount that can be exempted at that age? You know, I'll be honest with you, I think that there needs to be a consideration. The number I'm looking at is $500,000. I think that is a very, based on the realtors in the room, the average homeowner homesteaded property is that amount or less. I think that's a fair. To your point, somebody from California builds a $5 million house on a lake, hey, they're not going to have to pay taxes on the first $500,000. They can contribute on that above amount. That's kind of where I'm landing right now. But we got to talk to it, because there's going to be, you pull a lever here, you're going to push a lever over here.
Thanks. I really appreciate you guys having this session today, and a lot of information has been passed. I think there's a fair amount of time and energy that needs to go into this. And obviously, you go back to the comments you made earlier, you try and make it fair across the board for the whole state. I get all of that, and that makes some very good sense. I think the issue you have here in Dawson, and again, I got kind of blinded when I got here, and yeah, I spent 25 years in Forsyth County, so I understand. And when they did the 65, it made a lot of sense, and I probably would have stayed there. I was paid, you know, house paid off, everything. But I want to come up here, and I really have enjoyed Dawson County, and I think it's a great place. I think the folks at the county commission level, as well as the school board, because I've talked to both when we were going through all the tax things, just a phenomenal group of folks. So that is definitely going in the right direction. I'm very happy with all that. I think the biggest issue here, and I think most of the folks in the room, it's a senior issue, and I think that's one of the reasons you're having this discussion. But whether you change the age limit, whether that be 65 or 70, that could be your adjustment. I like your comment that, yeah, you better have lived here in this county for a little while, and, you know, so that you contributed some of that to this county before you're able to do that. Otherwise, yeah, every person from New York, New Jersey, and everybody just comes down here and gets, you know, no school tax. So I understand that whole scenario. It has to be fair to that. And is there a cap on the value of the home? Whatever. That's another way to deal with that. But you can do that with age too, you know. Yep. So, but something needs to be done, and I think a lot of folks are looking for that.
And we're glad you're here.
Yeah.
Glad you came.
Hi, my name is Mike Wenzel. And I'd like to make I don't have a suggestion.
Oh, you're breaking the rules.
You do have my phone number now.
Yeah, I have your phone number, and we have talked, and I've made some suggestions, but, you know, we've lived in the county for 30 years, and you know, the last 3 years, my property taxes have gone up 97%. Yeah, and I just want to make some comments that are personal to me, but you've made comments about, and like, Will, you were talking about the younger people buying homes and the interest rates. You know, back when I was buying a home as a young man, 7% was pretty normal. And in the early 80s, I actually had a mortgage that was 15%. So,
And the regulatory cost associated with home ownership was 92.1% less in every southern state.
And the cost of homes
The cost,
was a lot
the cost of
less.
homes was much less in real terms of real
Purchasing
dollars.
power of the
inflation.
dollar.
yeah, but this happened over here in Ohio.
Right.
Well,
And I paid 15%, and I was a young man, and I could afford it. I worked hard,
yes, sir.
and I don't have a pension. I worked in the private sector. I didn't work in government, so I don't have a pension. And I live on Social Security and my savings. And I have been paying school taxes. Never have I ever had any children in the schools here. And I've paid over $60,000 in school taxes. I think I need a break. And I think a lot of the ideas that you and Senator Gooch have talked about, man, I'm all in favor of them. Let's just make them happen. Okay?
I hear you. Yes, sir.
That was a suggestion.
That was a suggestion.
All right, we got about 7 more minutes. Did you get?
Hi, I am a relative newcomer here.
Welcome.
I've been here for a couple of years. Moved from Knoxville, Tennessee, so...
Do you bleed red or orange?
Orange all the way. But you know, we have 3 children and 4 grandchildren in Atlanta, so we moved down here. And absolutely love it here. The only complaint I have at all is the tax issue. My property taxes on my home has increased over 300% from the home I sold to the home I purchased here. So, you know, 25% increase in the home value, but a 350 to 400% increase in property tax. And
Comparing to where you came from?
Yes.
Here? Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
So the very successful very successful area in West Knoxville, you know, was able to do very well apparently on a very small fraction of the property tax rates here.
That's a district that has that host tax that I was telling you about. So it's an embedded sales tax to offset, and in some cases eliminate all homeowners' taxes for people over 65 in some states. So that may be a component of what.
That was not, because we had no exemption at that point, but I'm now of an age that might be appropriate, but at that time it was not. But you know, I just as an engineer, I just don't understand the mathematics of why a 25% higher home value would incur a 350% increased property tax. So something just doesn't make sense to me.
Okay.
But the things that we've heard here are very encouraging. So I certainly applaud that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, anyone have a quick question? You already
I just
had
want to do a
a
follow-up and say, I bought my first property here when Jimmy Carter was
Oh.
When I made the comment about being done buying here, it was the smartest thing I ever did. However, in retrospect, now that I've been a property owner for 40-something years, I would have probably been better off buying in Forsyth County just because of the school tax issue. The suggestions you made were outstanding, especially like the 5-year, so nobody gets a free ride and moves in. I appeal my taxes every 3 years. It just got reassessed on a 3-year freeze. The average was 25% a year. It doubled. And it was because of people moving in, right? So if we went back to that where you fix it at what you pay for it, these people moving in would be carrying the burden, not me.
Hey, good evening. Thank you guys for being here. Just really quick, I do mortgages, and like you will, we've had this discussion before. I'm really concerned about the youth, our kids and our grandkids being able to afford a house. And one of the big things that they brought up was homestead exemption. So that will help more people be able to afford homes. You know, the taxes being high or whatever, we can talk about that for days. But if we are able to issue a higher homestead exemption, that will just make homes more affordable for people who actually live in those homes versus, you know, investment properties.
Right.
So, you know, nothing against investors, but, you know, homestead exemptions, a higher homestead exemption would be fantastic. Also want to say I do support the T-SWAS, and, you know, it'd be great. Especially we get all that benefit from the outlet malls, the revenues there. You know, we kind of stay away from there on the weekends when the whole crowds are there. So we may maybe make an exemption on like Wednesdays or something, so the locals can go.
Hey,
There's an idea.
I'll tell you there's another, on the workforce housing piece, there is how many of y'all are familiar with intangible taxes on real property? So there's actually discussion on no longer requiring intangible taxes on people's primary residence. So when you buy, if you happen to be a person that has to borrow money, right now in the state of Georgia, you're paying $3 per thousand that you borrow on a property that you're going to have to pay property taxes on and transfer tax on. So to me, it's one of these things. And I love my county commissions and I love county government, but I was tasked as a freshman to do research, and so I contacted 10 different counties around the state, asking them in there. No offense to my friend, the county commissioner. Dawson County knew what they used their funds for. But there was a county a little south of us, when I talked to their administrator, they literally said to me, I love government people when they say this, oh, that's our slush fund. When I asked them what they use their intangible taxes for. And I went, that means discretionary, let's cut it. So Shaw Blackman's the chairman of Ways and Means. He's very interested in trying to tackle that. We got to look at trying to remove other taxes and fees. Just, look, we want to be a great place for people to have a home. And I appreciate everybody's input. I appreciate everybody providing your opinion, your thoughts, your ideas, your suggestions. I think the senator knows it. I've been living it, listening to it since day one. We are going to have a local legislation. I want to get it right. And I want to contemplate whoever's in this chair or in his chair in 20 years, because it's probably not going to be both of us. I want to make sure that they,
I'm saying.
I can tell you for sure it won't be me in 20 years. One more term is all I'm going to do.
so,
You won't.
You heard it right here, right?
but I want to make sure that we, you know, we're now at a point where this is an issue 23 years after the original stuff was set. So I want to make sure that we put it in codified, potentially with a sunset that forces the community to have this conversation again in 20 years or 25 years, because that's important. We don't know the ebbs and flows of what's going to happen, and I don't think that I should force my kids or grandkids to live under something I have an option to be able to change it to. So that's another component that I want to gain input from and look forward to. Thank you, man. She deserves a round of applause.
But I do want to thank each and every one of you for coming out today. This is a community solution to an opportunity that we have. I don't like to say problems, So I appreciate all of your input for that. If you did register for this event, I have your email. I'll be happy to send all of this out via email. If you didn't, feel free to email the chamber, and we will be sure that we get it out to you as well. All three of these gentlemen on the stage are very accessible. We're very blessed in Dawson County to have such accessibility to our state legislators and our local level that really do the best for Dawson County. So many of you said that you've called, you've reached out. There's never been a time that I haven't got a return call. So be sure that you do that and let your voice be heard so that they can go and make things happen at the state level. So, all right, thank you all for coming, and we'll see y'all soon.